So I have it now. This says we're only recording. It's not live streaming it, so we'll see how this goes.
Mine says live, like the little top
It
left
still
thing.
has live on it, but anyway. All right. Let's rock and roll. In 3, 2, 1. And welcome to episode 430 of Cinematary. I'm your host, Zach Dennis, and I'm here with.
Michael O'Malley.
In today's episode, we're going to be talking about movies that we saw this week in part 1. And in part 2, we're going to continue our Ernst Lubitsch series with The Smiling Lieutenant from 1931, which is an good old fashioned musical, because nothing says musical than a French gentleman staring straight at you, staring straight at the screen, making eye contact with you, and singing at you.
Only like 3 songs too.
All three, way too many. 3 too many, like eye contacts. Like if you want to sing, that's fine, but the eye contact was that really. I was like, sir, I don't know you that well.
The movie banks a lot on like the appeal of that guy just looking at
Yeah,
you.
we'll talk about how many people like are in love with this man later in the episode, but it's a lot. It's majority of the movie. All right, well, I'm gonna kick it off with a film I didn't actually see last week, but I've seen it recently, and that is Cadejo Blanco. It is one of the first films out of like kind of the Guatemalan film, not really film department, but like one of the first productions that was made and produced in Guatemala. Um, and I can't say that the Visit Guatemala is going to have this like playing to say, "Hey, come check it out," because it's all about human trafficking and gangs. So, but Cadeo Blanco, it came out last year. It played, I guess it played at 2021 TIFF, but was one of those kind of hidden world cinema movies that you don't get too much information on. So unfortunately, I missed it at that festival, but. This one, it stars an actress named Karen Martinez, and her character Sarita is kind of just this working class, lives with her grandmother and her sister. They live in Guatemala City, so in the suburbs of this city, and she goes with her sister to a nightclub. And her sister, after a few drinks, is like, "Yeah, I brought you here because I need to break up with this guy I'm seeing, but he, I don't think anything's going to go down, but just in case, I kind of want you nearby." And you kind of pick up through the interaction that he is a part of this gang and comes into the city during the weekends to work at this bar. And so she and her sister have this big fight because she's like, "Hey, like this dude seems like he's shitty. You should, just leave him." And she kind of, rejects that and is like, "Just get the hell out of here." So Sarita goes home, wakes up the next day and can't find her sister. She calls everybody. They get the police involved, all this stuff. Nothing. She tries to go to the bar again and like kind of flirt with the ex-boyfriend and get information from him, but doesn't really get anything. And so then she ends up learning that it's the gang that he is a part of is in this seaside town a number of hours outside of Guatemala City. And so she ends up going there, kind of weaseling her way into this gang, and joins it in order to infiltrate and get information about what happened to her sister. And naturally, like infiltrating the gang includes a little light prostitution, some stabbing and shooting people, and drug trafficking. So, but yeah, it's a pretty slim and relatively stylish thriller. I thought it's very self-assured for kind of being this. I looked at the director Justin Lerner, which is a very Guatemalan name. Um, and he had made like 4 movies outside, but they were a lot more smaller projects. This one was a little bit bigger budget, but um, yeah, it's not, I kind of run into this problem with a lot of these like um granted, like all there's a lot of the American thrillers look very much the same, so I'm not saying, but some they're especially like these kind of European thrillers, they all kind of like look and feel like they have the same aesthetic going. Like the plot is always kind of similar, and like this was kind of like a nice break from an American or European thriller. It very much has the same hallmarks. It's not like anything that's transcending the genre at all, but I think it utilizes everything pretty well. The main actress, Karen Martinez, is solid, but I think the real star of it is what's his name, Brandon Lopez, who plays the ex boyfriend who she kind of gets closer and closer with, trying to find information about her sister's disappearance. But I mean, it's twist. It has some good twists and turns. And once she joins this gang, like the first thing she has to do is seduce this rival drug dealer, get him, into this motel room so that 2 of the other, the gang members with her can, put a hit on him and kill him. And it's a pretty tense, well set up sequence where she is kind of floating around this club, gets his attention. They get in the car. He wants to like drive back to his place, and she's is able to get him out of the car to go to her motel room and all this stuff. It's in in those those sequences are pretty tense. You have a lot of just these interactions with the leader of this gang that I feel like she holds her own in. And a lot of these violent sequences I think are set up in a way that there is the actress is able to kind of really get this like kind of emotional toll out of those moments that I think makes it more than just kind of like bang bang, we're just gonna go shoot all these people and leave a blood trail. So um it's even though it came out last year, I think they're trying to get a US release through art house theaters pretty soon. We got a special screening here in Savannah, so if you can go see it, Cadejo Blanco. It seems like one of those. It'll pop up like on your Hulu or Netflix or whatever. It's just kind of this, what the heck's this thing? But solid thriller, solid little thriller. Reminded me a little bit of like if people remember Sin Nombre,
Oh yeah.
Miss Bala, like movies like that. Like it kind of has a similar vibe of like kind of how it handles kind of outsider joining into this criminal gang kind of thing. So, and that's Sin Nombre especially was one that I was kind of thinking about while watching this one. That's a good reference point for people. So Cadejo Blanco, check it out. I'm sure it'll get some sort of wide-ish release or something at some point.
Do you know anything about the film industry in Guatemala?
I don't. Um,
Yeah, I'm just curious how many. I don't get the feeling that they export a ton of films, but I'm wondering like within the country if maybe there's more.
hmm. I just know this was like a big deal. I'm sure they have stuff in the country. This was just kind of the first, like it's getting sent out to international film festivals. It's kind of going through a circuit. It was picked up by the film distributor Film Movement, who's going to be distributing it out. So
Okay.
I think it's just more one that broke out of just Guatemala is more the thing. It's not that Guatemalan people just started making movies, 2 or 3
Yeah,
years ago.
I'm sure they are.
Yeah, so this was kind of the breakthrough one that that kind of got the word out there. And I don't know. I'm like, again, is this gonna, like I said, is this gonna be one that Guatemalan tourism is gonna be cheering? No, it's all about human trafficking and drug gangs and people getting killed. So, but good little thriller, good little fun. I like I like how it handles some class issues in there. It's pretty interesting. So, Cadejo Blanco, check it out if it ever comes out near you. But I'm gonna turn it over to you, Michael, because you have the movie of the moment for the film Twittery people.
Yeah, this is certainly. I went out and saw Tar, T-A with an accent R, um, this past week, and if you've been on the letterbox or been on Twitter as it's sinking into Elon Musk's mire, um, you've probably heard of Tar. It's it's it like I think it's worth the conversation. Like it's the kind of movie that seems intentionally provoking conversation. So it makes sense that this is the movie that a lot of people are talking about right now, as we're kind of like edging into awards season, I suppose. And so I went and saw this. This is the first film in a while that has been directed by Tom Field, and I'm not familiar with his other movies. Like I haven't seen In the Bedroom or I can't remember the other one. In the Bedroom, I had at least heard of. But anyway, it's been a while since Tom Field directed a movie, and now he's directing this one, which I will not describe a ton of the plot because for reasons I'll get into in a minute. But basically, this is about this fictitious, but within the world of the movie, this like apparently like just genius, um, like conductor and composer, whose name is Lydia Tarr, played by Kate Blanchett. And the movie opens with this interview with an actual like New Yorker film critic. It's not Alex Ross; it's the other guy. I
Richard
was
Brody.
no. Brody's he's a film critic, isn't he?
Oh, you mean a movie? Oh, you mean music critic?
Did I say movie critic?
Yeah, I was like,
I'm
Richard
sorry.
Brody's in this. That's awesome.
No. It's a music critic for the New Yorker, and it's like it's got to be like a 10-minute scene that's just like opening, and it's an interview in front of an audience, uh, interviewing Lydia Tarr for the magazine, I suppose, and it's also a live event. And it's through this you get like all this exposition about her backstory. So like she's got an EGOT, right? Apparently, she has all these other acclaimed prestigious awards, and she's currently in the process of adapting this series of oh man my so one of the things about this movie is it uses a lot of it drops a lot of names and uses a lot of terminology from like symphonic like the orchestral world, and I'm so out of touch with that I'm sure that I will misname things just talking about this now. But she is um adapting she's in the process of adapting a series of I think symphonies that Leonard Bernstein had also adapted, and Leonard Bernstein is like her idol and like her muse basically. And so like that was the person who got her into music, and so now that she's like got this clout in her career, she's deciding to like readapt these things that Leonard Bernstein had also readapted, and she's done all I think there were 9 symphonies, and there's only the fifth one left. And so the movie is basically surrounding like her and her life as she is starting to decide the arrangement for and then start picking the musicians who are going to be performing this last in her cycle of symphonies that she's adapting. And it's kind of like the impression is this is kind of like her victory lap, her like kind of like a she's done all the like all the stuff you're supposed to do, and so now she gets to do the thing that she really wants to do. um,
Mhm.
and basically what you see over the course of the movie is that fall apart for her, and the reasons why it falls apart are a little bit opaque, which is something that's kind of weird about the movie, but and I'll get into that in a second. But like the big thing that immediately presents itself with the movie is like Kate Blanchett as she, in this acting role, um, is just magnetic because Lydia Tarr is this like very acerbic, prickly personality, um, and Kate Blanchett just like really jumps into that. It reminded me a lot of Phantom Thread, like how Daniel Day Lewis does the what is, like the fab what's the term for the guy that Daniel Day Lewis is? He makes the clothes. That guy. It's
The
like that kind of
designer.
designer. Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah,
It's like that kind of role in that like it's just an extremely watchable asshole. Like you
fair.
just love to see like this person just be just so um just like an absolute dick to everyone, but also be like just so amusing and also like so self-confident about it that you're kind of like caught up in it. Um and But eventually, like as a result of like how she's treated people, things like chickens start coming home to roost. But the thing that really um cements it is that there's like throughout the first like 30 minutes of the movie or something, there's she keeps getting emails from this person and they kind of withhold who she's getting emails from, and her assistant is like, what should we do about these emails? And Tara's just like, just ignore them. But it turns out this was like a former protege that she had worked with, who um eventually in the course of the movie, and this will be like as far as the plot, like I'll spoil, I guess, and this is like a minor spoiler, um, since most of the plot hinges on this. But this person kills herself as a result of like a kind of like mental breakdown after she doesn't. According to the person and these emails, Tar has promised her things as a result of sexual favors that Tar has then not followed through on. And in terms of like career and having picked her for like chairs in the symphony and things like that. Um, and so the movie kind of flips at that point from like, oh, Tara, what an amusing, um, prickly genius to, oh, Tara, are you actually just a manipulative, awful person who destroys everyone around you? Um, and that's kind of the arc of the movie. Like a lot of the conversation about this movie is been like, is this a movie about cancel culture and stuff? And I mean, it is definitely adjacent to that because like a lot of the movie hinges on like what happens to this woman's career as this allegation comes out. Like once it becomes public that like it's alleged that she has like been in a sexual relationship with a kind of understudy who um, you know is then manipulated and then eventually driven to suicide. Um, but the movie is super tricky about that because the movie is exclusively from Lydia Tarr's perspective in the sense that we don't ever get any sort of any scene in which she is not present. Um, and we also don't get some scenes in which she would be present. Like they're just gone from the movie. And so what the movie presents us with is a lot of people making accusations, and a lot of behavior by Tar that is like questionable. But the movie never gives us like a definite like smoking gun as far as like what has she actually done, like what is the extent to which she is um actually trafficked in like abusive behavior. And it's clear that like she is problematic, but it's unclear like to what extent are we supposed to think that she has actually done these things. And
Mhm.
I say that it's unclear because like as I was watching the movie I wasn't sure like how much of this am I supposed to be inferring. And having gone and read reviews, it seems like people are very split on, is the movie like what is the movie trying to say about like what Lydia Tarr has done and what we're supposed to think about her. And the movie's really it's just really knotty and complicated to walk through because it seems like the more I've thought about it, it seems like a crucial component of the project of the movie is to have withheld this information. um, and so rather than it being a movie about cancel culture, it's kind of a movie about sitting and watching cancel culture in the sense of like that most of
Mhm.
us have access to it, which is that like, oh, someone alleges impropriety by the celebrity. The celebrity says that they didn't do it. But we also know that the celebrity has really, it has a track record with, whatever,
Mhm.
problematic behavior that we've kind of brushed off as amusing in the past. And what are we supposed to do with that? Like we as I will never be able to sit there and like actually suss out like I will never have been in the room when any of this stuff happens just because I'm not connected to the industry. And like this film being set in the world of classical music means that even fewer people are connected with it than like let's say in like the film industry when stuff like this comes out. Um and I don't know, it's just really it's kind of a weird and unnerving movie in that sense of like you as a viewer feel kind of powerless in terms of what you're supposed to be thinking because you are at the mercy of what the movie chooses to tell you. And like as the movie goes on, like the movie tells you less and less stuff. And it becomes even more unnerving in that sense where it's like I'm not sure what I'm supposed to be thinking at this moment. Like for instance, there's a moment in which Lydia Tarr is in like this movie takes place in Berlin, by the way. She's in like some rundown like apartment block in Berlin, and she is like in this like kind of like underground alleyway. I'm not exactly sure what it is, and she keeps hearing footsteps behind her and gets increasingly spooked and starts running. And she runs up some stairs and trips and falls on the stairs. And the instant that she falls, the movie cuts to the next day, and she's walking around with like her face mangled. And she says that she's been attacked, but we never actually see the attack. We never actually see if someone is truly following her or if she's just hearing things or just hearing footsteps and perceiving that someone is following her. But she goes around the rest of the movie claiming that, like, oh, I've been attacked. And that's not even a major part of the movie, but that's kind of indicative of the kind of games that this movie plays with, like, you have to make an inference about what truly has happened. Um, and the movie does not like the movie kind of baits you in certain ways to think that things happen, but then when you sit back and think about it, you think, I don't actually know that that thing happened. My brain is making a connection because of two scenes that are juxtaposed with one another. And it's really interesting and really weird. And I don't know, like, I'm not sure if this movie means anything. It may be like actually an anti-cancel culture movie. It may be like just kind of this reactionary. Like I saw someone compare it on Letterboxd to that like Harper's letter that a bunch of people signed.
Yeah, well,
Where
that's what I was gonna ask. Like, even though you say it's kind of like adjacent, cancel culture adjacent, like, what do you, at least in your opinion, like, what do you think it's trying to say about it?
I have no idea. That's like it's a super opaque movie in that regard because we never are told what happens. Or I guess what I'm saying is we're never shown what happens, right? We're given reasons to mistrust Lydia Tarr. Like we know that she lies about some things. And so it would be reasonable to think that, well, she's lying about having abused, her position of power in the ways that she's accused of. But also, I don't know, like there are things about the movie that just make it hard to just genuinely like 100% think that. There's always that like kernel of doubt, right? And there's like a few parts of the movie that give you this kernel of doubt and make it hard to actually say. So I don't know, it's really I mean it could be just I mean okay, so like the very uncharitable reading of the movie, or at least uncharitable from my perspective, would be this is a movie about how we don't know anyone truly, and so we shouldn't make moral judgments about them, even when other people say otherwise. Like that's one way that I could see someone coming out of this movie thinking, like, well, cancel culture is bad because we will never know what happened. That's between them two, and they got to figure it out, right? That's one way to read this movie. Um, and if that is indeed like the intent of this movie, that seems like a bad thing to be like. That's a lame point to be making in a movie
Mhm.
um, because the movie kind of invites us to make moral judgments anyway. Like we are privy to details of this woman's personal life that the public wouldn't normally know. This isn't like a documentary in which we only have access to the things that filmmakers have access to. Like we see her alone in a room and things like that. Um, not to mention that that's just kind of a weird way to deal with this issue. But at
Mhm.
the same time, like I don't feel like the movie's not like really openly like sympathetic to victims either, and not in, or at least not in the traditional way. And in fact, like the person who makes the accusation appears in the film at multiple points before she kills herself, and we never see her face. Like she's just got red hair. That's literally all we know about her. We just keep seeing this woman from behind at a distance with red hair, and we eventually put together that's who she is. But like the movie almost like perversely withholds any sort of information whatsoever about like who this person would have been like. What do we even know about her? Like the only thing that we do know is that she appears to have been stalking Lydia Tarr at the beginning of the movie, or maybe she wasn't. Maybe I don't know. Like it's unclear what's happening. That's what Lydia Tarr later claims has happened, is that this woman was stalking her, which is why she was sending these kind of manic emails to her. Um, but I don't know. Like it's a movie that at first feels really straightforward, and then the more you try to like parse it out, the more it kind of falls apart in terms of having something definitive to stand on. And a lot of times I would say that that would be like a weakness in the movie, like this movie wasn't developed well enough. But
Mhm.
I think that that's like actually what was the intended effect of the movie. Like I think this movie was a very calculated attempt to make a movie that is impossible to parse on like the level of what is the reality that we were dealing with.
Mhm.
And I don't really know what to do with that. Um, I do know that this movie was very entertaining though. Like it is like I said, like Kate Blanchett is really good, and she is really fun to watch in the beginning stages of the movie where she's kind of on top of the world. And it is also really fun. Fun is the wrong word. It's also really engaging to watch as like her world starts to crumble around her, because Kate Blanchett's performance gets increasingly like feral, and you see like as she has worked so hard or so carefully to build up this kind of safe world around her, and all of a sudden those things start going away, and it's like a really incredible performance, and she adds a lot to the character that we don't really get from the text of the film, like you know or at least like as the character's written. There's just like ways in which she acts that I think like add a lot of nuance. Like I can imagine this movie being a lot less interesting if you didn't have like Kate Blanchett like adding the you can see like these conflicting emotions or conflicting thoughts like going on in her head, like just by the way that Kate Blanchett acts, and also just her ability to like portray this person as someone who has basically lost touch with the ability to be close with people and have empathy for people, but also still understands how to uh, exist in the world, and like she has big ideas and stuff. Like she's not like sociopathic in like the traditional sense, but like for instance, there's this long running little bit with her neighbor. Like she lives in an apartment, and her neighbor like continues to show up, and as the film kind of like shows her as like being just like kind of disregarding this neighbor a bunch, but like the way that Kate Blanchett plays it, there's almost like a fear that is in there too. Like her encounter with someone who is not part of this world that she has curated is something that gives her anxiety. And that's really interesting. And where that goes is really kind of interesting and dark as well. I don't know. I'm kind of rambling at this point because there's a lot going on in this movie, but
Mhm.
it's worth seeing. And it's a movie that seems to be crafted intentionally so that you can go talk to people about it because it is so opaque on
Mhm.
a certain level. But for a movie as opaque it is, it's also really approachable, I thought, because of just how engaging the central character is just as a screen presence.
Hmm.
Uh, so I don't know. I was telling Zach off mic. I saw this on a work night, like at 9 o'clock in the evening, and it's like a 2 hour and 40 minute movie. And I was like prepared for this to be like, oh, this is gonna be a slow movie. I'm like caffeinated up. I gotta like make sure I'm gonna be awake for this movie. But I don't. That didn't end up being a problem for me. It's a pretty fast moving movie for the kind of movie that it is. It's not like a thriller in the sense of like Mission Impossible or something like that. But um, it's a movie where it's constantly in motion and constantly developing its plot and the arc of this character. And I thought it was really watchable on that level. Like on a thematic level, I don't really know what's going on there, and maybe that's the point. I don't know.
Hmm. No, it's one that I missed it while I was kinda in the area just because, it was tough to get away with the length, not because I was like, "Oh god, 3 hours," but more just, setting aside that time to go see it, but no, I definitely wanna try to watch it somehow before
Yeah, and if
the end of the
people can
year.
see it in a theater, like I know everybody says, you should watch movies in theaters, and I agree. But like the specific pacing of this movie and the way it is filmed like really invites like a cinematic environment because first of all, it's fairly deliberate and slow, but in a way that when you're paying attention, it ceases to be slow because of all these interesting details. But if I would imagine, like, if we're to watch this at home and have like distractions or having to stop it a bunch, like it would lose a lot of its momentum just because it's not a movie that has like this, you know, exciting forward momentum in like a traditional way, but like it is this accumulation of details that eventually becomes really compelling and exciting.
Hmm.
Um, so I don't know, like it's not like a movie with like big imagery or anything like that, but it's a movie that I think really benefits from like sitting in a room watching it like on a big screen.
Mhm. Okay. Tar. Well, speaking of, from a movie that needs to be on the big screen to a movie that you can only watch at home. Uh,
Yeah, so
yeah.
I also watched another new release. And that was the new Cartoon Saloon movie called My Father's Dragon. And My Father's or Cartoon Saloon, you've I'm sure heard if you've listened to the podcast a lot, heard us talk about it. This is the movie studio that brought us The Secret of Kells and Wolfwalker and The Breadwinner, Song of the Sea. So this is the new one from them. It is only on Netflix. It is yet again another really visually interesting animated film that is stuck on Netflix. I don't know what's the deal with Netflix, but they scoop up all these interesting looking animated
Well,
films
that's
and then don't distribute them.
well, even worse, like Wolfwalkers, they got a deal with Apple TV Plus, and so like, who the like Apple Plus? The only people I
Yeah,
know who have Apple Plus don't they like sign they like do it for like a month and watch stuff and then get rid of it
they just
after
watch
that
Ted
month.
Lasso and then
Yeah, they'll like catch up on like Ted Lasso and whatever other shows, and then be like out after the month, and then do that again in like 6, 8 months again.
yeah. So I guess credit to Netflix. People actually watch Netflix.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like Wolfwalkers, I it's an amazing movie that I wish people could see, but it's difficult to watch because you have to have Apple Plus.
Yeah.
And
So I think most people have access to Netflix, hopefully, and so you can watch My Father's Dragon. And I would recommend watching My Father's Dragon. It is the weakest of the Cartoon Saloon movies, I think, and it's still good though, because it's a high pedigree. All the Cartoon Saloon movies are good to great, and this one's good. Um,
it's
it's
written by not sorry to derail you.
oh, you're
It's written
fine.
by the woman who did Inside Out and The Good Dinosaur for Pixar.
I did not know that at all. I was about to say it's directed by Nora
Yeah,
Twomey. I don't. How do you pronounce her last name? Is it Twomey? Twomey?
it's as good as my guess would be.
My Irish ancestors are shaking their fists from their potato famine graves. But anyway, so this is the woman. She's a co-founder of the studio. Like, I mean, the studio I
Mhm.
think is really small because it's all the same people always directing these
Well,
movies.
it's either her or Tom Moore.
Right. And so like her and Tom Moore co-directed The Secret of Kells,
Yeah.
and then she directed solo, I believe, The Breadwinner, which is kind of
Mhm.
an outlier in the Cartoon Saloon canon because it is not set in Ireland. It is
And it's
in
not.
it's in Iran, is it?
Yeah, and it's not. If I remember correctly, it's not very like folklore heavy like the other ones
It's
are.
got some folklore, but it's not Irish folklore for sure. Like it's got like a recurring like a fairy tale that I think that the like a grandmother tells to her
Yeah.
daughter, and that becomes like a
It's
motif.
been so long since I saw it.
At any rate,
Mhm.
so um, she directed My Father's Dragon, which is, I guess, based on a children's book. I'm not familiar with the children's book, so it's possible that some of the things I say about this are because of it was in the children's book rather than it was like a independent creative decision. But that said, like one of the reasons I feel like this is the weakest Cartoon Saloon movie is that the plot kind of doesn't hold together. It honestly does have a like good dinosaur feel to it. Now that you say it,
Mhm.
so the plot is that it's what appears to be the beginning of the Great Depression or something. Like it's set in this kind of like ambiguous space where I think it's supposed to be America, but all the city names are made up. But this mom and her son like run a general store, but then I think the depression hits or something hits, like the Dust Bowl, something like
Mhm.
that. And the town that they're in, like, basically dies. Like, no one lives there anymore, and so they can't keep the general store. So they have to move to a big city, which seems kind of like New York City, but it's called Nevergreen City because there's not any green in it. Um,
Cute.
yeah, and it's real tough because the mom keeps telling the boy that, like, okay, we're gonna be able to open up a store in Nevergreen City just like we had in the previous place. But it turns out that like rent is ridiculous and they're having trouble making ends meet, and they have this jar that they're saving money so they can buy like stuff for the store, but the jar keeps running empty because the mom has to use the change to like make phone calls so that she can ask for jobs and things like that. And so eventually the kid gets real mad that the mom said promised that they would open up a store, and the mom, who's like stressed out and like trying to put food on the table and make sure they don't get evicted, like yells at him, and there's like a falling out, and he runs off and meets this cat who talks to him and says like, "Hey, you look like you're in need of some money. I know where you can find a dragon, and then you can sell tickets to see this dragon and earn some money." And the kid's like, "That sounds good." And turns out
That's
this
such a
dragon
wonderful scenario.
turns out this dragon is on an island, and so this kid hops on a whale to go to this island, and
You
on
just
the
said it really
way,
nonchalantly, like,
well, this
so
is
then he hops on a whale and
the movie has like this where the wild things are kind of structure, where it is initially set in this kind of realistic like domestic environment, and then immediately just goes into fairy tale land, like when the kid leaves, like upon like an emotional kind of outburst. And it just kind of is uncommented upon. It's like, oh yeah, of course, off the coast of this, out in the harbor in the city is this magical island with a dragon. um, there's also a magical island that is just tangerine trees, and they just can eat tangerines all the time,
hmm,
which is nice. But anyway, so this kid gets to this island and finds out this island is an island that is sinking into the ocean, um, and the dragon has been captured by these monkeys who have tied the dragon to the island, and the dragon has to fly upwards so that the island doesn't sink. It's like the dragon is like keeping the island afloat so that the life on the wildlife on the island, these monkeys can survive. And so the kid's going to steal the dragon, but then in doing so that's going to like destroy the island. And so it becomes this whole thing. And eventually the kid like rescues the dragon, and the dragon's like this kind of like goofy dude who doesn't know what's going on, and he's kind of like immature and like afraid of everything. And he and the kid strike up this friendship, and eventually the monkeys turn out to be okay too because they're just scared for their lives. That's why they've captured the dragon. And then the kid kind of comes around to like, oh, I realized I was scared and my mom was
mhm.
scared, and that's why we were yelling at each other. And then he goes back home, and they've kind of made up, and things get better for him. Um, I don't really know what happens to their money problems. It kind of gets dropped by the time he goes back. And I guess like that's kind of like the reason why this movie doesn't hold together. Like most cartoon saloon movies, it looks amazing.
Mhm.
Um, this movie is just like visually sumptuous, like just the colors, and it's a little bit less like a lot of the old cartoon saloon movies have like this big like really big geometric feel where all the characters are like
Yeah.
based on geometric shapes, like big rectangular shoulders or round heads and stuff. And this movie's a little bit less like that, but it's still really beautiful to look at in terms of animation. You've just got some just really amazing imagery, and especially like once you get to that island, and it's all just like impossible like geometry, like impossible landscapes and like big mushrooms, and kind of that sort of like just rampant like imagination with no holds barred because it's animation. You can do whatever you
Mhm.
want in animation, and it looks really cool. Um, so like this movie is no less visually interesting than the other cartoon saloon movies. It's just the plot doesn't isn't there. And it is there at first. Like initially, like all the stuff with them having to go to the city and the money problems, and then the kid runs off and goes to the island. Like that's all good. But once he gets to the island, it kind of loses the thread a little bit and just becomes like this like accumulation of weird, kind of fun, but also unrelated like fantasy stuff. with the monkeys and the dragon and like stuff. And where the wild things are is I feel like it's a good comparison point because where the wild things are, at least like in the book as well as like the movie that was made off of it, that also has a bunch of weird fantasy stuff, all these big creatures and stuff.
Mhm.
But all of that is building toward like a kind of emotional catharsis by the end of the movie. And I think that that's what this movie is trying to do too, is all of the fantasy hijinks are trying to be in like tie into that larger plot or larger emotional resonance that the kid like that emotional epiphany that the kid has to get about fear and like understanding that everyone is afraid and you should treat people with compassion because of that. And like that's nice, but I think the script is just not successful at tying all those things together. And so you get to this epiphany moment that feels like it should be big, but it's not, or it doesn't connect as such. Um and so it kind of like, is a little bit underwhelming in that regard. Um, but it looks cool. It looks super cool, and I really wish that it hadn't ended up on Netflix and instead had been in a theater, because I think it would be an amazing theatrical experience. Just having colors whoosh at you, and we've got a Disney movie coming out in a couple of weeks that seems a similar plot, where it's like somebody traipsing through like weird fantasy environment,
Mhm.
and
Strange Worlds. I saw
yeah,
the first look the other day.
strange worlds, and I mean like I mean, at this point, Disney can make like good looking
Who made that?
CGI movies, and we've talked about this before. But in terms of like, you look at like the trailer for that movie versus me having just watched this movie, and I just think there's no way that that Disney movie is going to look even half as good as this movie. Even if like the designs are cooler, just the just the vibrancy and the way that like all of Cartoon Saloon movies, like their use of color, it just like glows. Like it's their movies are just luminous because of the colors that they use. And
Yep.
I just don't see that anywhere else in animation. It's just really cool looking. And I gotta watch it on Netflix with compression artifacts.
Yeah. No, I'm looking at Strange World now. I mean, I don't know. It looks like kind of like an updated Buck Rogers type situation thing.
And that's
Um,
cool. I mean, it might be good.
yeah.
Maybe it'll be good, but like this is the movie I
But
want
no,
to see in a theater.
but yeah, no, I agree with you. Like it's lacking in the textures, and I think that just kind of comes from the Disney house style that they have now. I'm just not a giant fan of the Disney house style that they're using at this moment. The kind of frozen, tangled, that one. But no, but I agree with with Cartoon Saloon. There's just kind of this. It's to a degree why why you go to Ghibli movies as well. Like there's just this kind of like this texture to it. There's just this kind of comfort to it that feels very akin to early 20th century Disney animation that you have that comfort feeling with, but it feels updated enough so it's not like it's some lost, old art being practiced.
Yeah,
I'm like,
it's not pastiche, it's its own thing, but
it feels very modern still.
right. Yeah, and in fact like the earlier ones, like the ones um like Secret of Kells for instance, like it's not that that movie's cheap looking, but I think they had less money to do that with, and also the animation technology probably wasn't as good, but it is like
Mhm.
very visibly like indebted to like Flash and that sort of thing. Like um
Well, and I'm looking at the Strange World. I I like the Secret of Kells also because it's a deeply like 2D movie.
yeah.
It feels like everything's kind of going that way. Like it never feels like that lack of, and I'm like, that's fine. Like I think we need like that variety to it. Like even that on a very simple, simplistic level is interesting to me because
Right, yeah.
it's not that usual digital 3D scape that you're getting with like Lightyear, what you talked about a couple weeks ago, and in something like Frozen or Tangled or Big Hero 6.
I think my thing is that like I like the way that Disney movies have looked in the past like since Tangled. Like I think they generally like before a lot of like animation studios figured out how to bring cartooniness back to to CGI animation. Like I like that. The problem is that, and this is always the problem with Disney animation, is that it is such a hegemonic force. Like I shouldn't have to scrounge around on Netflix to find a movie that they've not promoted at all to find something really beautiful in animation. Like a healthy like animation scene or or a country's output or like, you know, whatever, like it should have room for like a diversity of styles. But I mean, blah 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 capitalism, right? You know, like you know, the model that Disney espouses is like uh it undercuts any alternative to itself at all costs, and
Mhm.
just has made a like really hostile market for anything that's not Disney or connected to Disney or appears to be like Disney in some way.
Well,
And yeah, anyway,
well, no, this is the last thing. I sent you the picture that this weekend or this past weekend, um,
oh,
Studio
the Yoda
Ghibli,
Ghibli.
yeah, Studio Ghibli teamed up with Disney on like this Baby Yoda short film, and like part of me kind of wants to see it just on the Ghibli factor, but part of me is also annoyed that it's that team up's happening and it's only on Disney Plus. Like, there's just I'm just like I texted Michael. I was like, really, it's just nothing sacred. Can we?
Not for Disney, no. But again, I feel like I've brought this up like a lot, but Netflix is not really that like great of a company either. But somehow they have an eye for animation. Like if you go scroll through like the Netflix distributed animated features on Netflix, like it's a pretty good little like catalog of diverse styles, interesting voices, like stuff that at least is worth your attention on some level. And this is another addition to that. So, you know, even if Disney is kind of hedging everybody out of the theaters or has just conditioned people not to care about animation that doesn't have the Disney brand or something like that, you know, at least you still got this. You got
Mhm.
this, you got the house, you got friggin' oh, there's other ones too. I'm just, you know, running blank on that. But it's good. Seek it out.
Yeah,
It's not as good as some of the other ones, but it's still good. It will probably be better than Strange Worlds.
yeah, yeah. At least this one, at least this one only has one writer. That Raya and the Last Dragon, I was on the podcast ranting about because it had like 7 writers, and then
Yeah.
whatever the next movie after that, what was the oh shoot,
Oh, you're talking about Encanto?
Encanto, was it Encanto? It might
That's
have
the
been
next one
Encanto.
after The Last Dragon.
It might have been Encanto. Like, why do you need 50 damn writers for this? Like, it's not that complex.
I don't know. It's true. One writer can give you a movie with
Let me look.
problematic and
Yeah,
incomplete character arcs
it
as
has
well.
it
So,
has 6 writers to write fucking Encanto. It's not
well,
complex. It's fun. They sing. Whatever. You know who else is
yeah.
gonna sing? This goddamn smiling lieutenant who we're gonna talk
Hell
about in
yeah.
part two.
Ho ho
Uh,
ho. Wee
yeah,
wee wee.
we're gonna talk about him after this break. I don't want to get down the rabbit hole of figuring out why Disney Animation needs 6 freaking writers on their stuff.
This is like Hollywood filmmaking in general. Like I never understand like where do all these fucking writers come from? And then sometimes there's uncredited writers, like the original Toy Story, for instance. Like apparently Joss Whedon did like a draft of that, and some of his lines are still in the movie, but he's not a credited writer. Like I don't really understand like how all that works with like who gets credit and who doesn't.
I don't know. Like, I mean, like the movie we're about to talk about, Ernst Lubitsch technically wrote a bunch of it, but he's not the credited writer or credited writers. He's not one of them.
One of
Let
the
him.
things that's kind of interesting about Tar, that wasn't really worth bringing up in the podcast, but it begins with the ending credits, and so and it does the ending credits in reverse. Not like it's scrolling up, but you see like the roles like best boy and stuff like that like first, and then
Mhm.
they finally get like it builds up to director at the very end and like the stars at the very end, and like you're not seeing anything. It's like a black screen with just like the ending credits over it. And it has it's weird that it foregrounds all of that. Just like all the crew gets foregrounded first.
It is a little weird.
Yeah, I don't know. There's something. I'm sure there's something thematic going on with that, but
You also forgot to mention that. Did you mention that Nina Haas is in that movie? That would be the most important thing that I would mention is Nina Haas is in a movie.
I did not mention it. But she's good.
She's always good.
She's the like Lydia Tarr has a, I don't know if it's her wife or just partner or something like that. And she used to be uh like an understudy for Lydia Tarr or something like that, but she's like married to her now. It's weird.
Hmm. No, I love Nina Haas.
She's good.
I think this is one of the few. I guess she's been in other stuff. Never mind, I take it back. I just don't see her that often in like American movies.
I mean, this is almost like looking at the credits, and I thought about this because they show you the credits first. Like, this is basically an international production. Like all the cast and crew have like German or Eastern European names.
Well, I'm looking. I'm,
Um,
I'm looking. I mean, you got Kate Blanchett. You got Mark Strong. Those are two. I mean, Kate Blanchett and Mark Strong's an English actor. But I mean, you got Nina Haas, Germany. You have Naomi Merlant from Portrait of a Lady on Fire.
yeah, she's really
Um,
good in this, by the way.
yeah,
She's her like assistant.
she's
She's always
always
walking
good
around with
too.
a clipboard.
She's always good too. Also hot, but also good. She's good.
But yeah, like
I like
all of
this.
the
I like this Vogue in Tar. Naomi Merlant settles the score. All right.
she kind of does. Yeah, I'd be interested to see what you have to say about it. I kind of wish Andrew was on because he and I texted a little bit about the movie, but
Did he see it?
he did. Yeah.
I knew he was trying to.
I asked him if he wanted to go at 9 p.m. and he said no. So he went and saw it another time.
Nobody will take the 9 p.m. plunge with you.
I got another friend who went with me.
Oh, okay.
It was all good.
Oh, Andrew's still stewing on it. He has no rating.
I
It's
stewed on it for a while. It's a movie to stew on.
all right. Let's talk about the old smiling lieutenant here. I saw? Oh, you watched? I don't want to be a man.
Yeah, yeah, because that's only like 40 minutes or
45
something.
minutes. Yeah.
Yeah, that was good. I
Hmm.
liked it.
Strange little movie.
It's a strange little movie.
I like that the poster for the Smiling Lieutenant on Letterbox is literally just a portrait shot of Maurice Chevalier.
Just staring into your soul,
Yeah, well, it looks like something that you'd put like Maurice Chevalier, actor. Like it's the most.
or like a headshot or something.
It's. Let me see if I can. Can I pull the? It's gonna let me pull the image. Oh dang! I want to just like send you the image. It's a
No,
really stupid poster.
I'm
Yeah,
on
if you,
Letterboxd now. I'm looking at it.
yeah, just like a boring ass photo for it. Tells you nothing,
He's
nothing about.
smiling. I guess he's a lieutenant.
It looks like he's going to church. What? All right, let's do it.
Alrighty.
In 3, 2, 1. And we're back with part 2 of episode 430 of Cemetery. In this part, we're going to be continuing our Ernst Lubitsch directed series with 1931's The Smiling Lieutenant, which is one of his musicals that he made for Paramount when he got into America.
How
Directed
many
by,
musicals did he make?
I think like I'm probably wrong, but like in the range of like 4 to 5 maybe. There's a
Okay,
collection for, the Criterion Collection has like a little box set thing of all the musicals that he made, and he made a couple with Maurice Chevalier, the lead. Um,
gotcha.
but this one comes from a script by Samson Raphaelson and Ernest Valja, uh, or Vajda. The film stars Maurice Chevalier, Claudette Colbert, and Miriam Hopkins. A simple wink intended by Austrian palace guard Lieutenant Nicholas von Priem for girlfriend Franzi is accidentally intercepted and misread by the visiting Prince Anna. As a result, the soldier has no choice but to marry the royal lady and to move with her to the neighboring kingdom of Flossenthrum. His girlfriend follows to continue the romance and subversively give Princess Anna tips on how to keep her husband satisfied. According to a biography of Lubitsch by Scott Eyman, the director had discovered that his first wife was having an affair with his best friend and longtime collaborator, the screenwriter Hans Kraley. There had been a public fistfight. Divorce papers had been served, and Lubitsch had left Hollywood for Paramount Studios in Astoria, Queens. Chevalier described performing, quote, smiles and cute winks of the eye, a, quote, mechanical display of technique due to grief over his mother's death, which happened while the film was in production. Lubitsch also played referee between Colbert and Hopkins, who were determined to be shot from the same angle. Lubitsch encouraged their dispute that suited their characters on screen. By the 1950s, film experts believed that the film no longer existed. However, a print was recovered in the 1990s in the Danish Film Archives. For Lubitsch, the new medium of sound movies wasn't just for recording dialogue, but also for bringing out the musicality contained in sound effects. He used sound to suggest whole realms of off screen space unavailable to the silent film, employing sound cues as a way of replacing dialogue, like the trumpet call in The Smiling Lieutenant, much as he would use visual cues to replace entire sequences of dramatic action. The Smiling Lieutenant was Paramount's biggest grosser of 1931. It was also named the year's best 10 by the New York Times, along with Charlie Chaplin's City Lights and F.W. Murnau's Taboo. And on that note, let's talk a little bit about the Smiling Lieutenant. Yeah, you got the addition of sound compared to last week's offering. And I mean, I guess it's a musical. There are a number of like singing moments that are included in it, but
It is weird to talk about this in the. I'm
doesn't
I'm
really.
not super familiar with older musicals, but like the earliest musical that I'm really familiar with is The Wizard of Oz, which is only like 8 years after this. Well, I guess in the Seven Dwarfs is just 7 years after this.
Mhm.
It's amazing to me that those movies feel recognizably like what I would call a musical, but this movie is not. This movie is like they occasionally sing.
Yeah, it's odd. I mean, I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, like the first time they sing is Maurice Chevalier like looking straight at the camera and like making eye contact with you and then singing. And it's very like it's very discern like, I didn't like it. I felt very uncomfortable because he's just like staring right at you, singing at you. And like it's this fourth wall breaking thing that you're just like, what's going on? That he only does like maybe at the beginning and the end. I can't remember if he does it again.
It is really weird. Also, am I remembering correctly? This is one of the early, if not the first musical that used the music as part of its plot rather than because, like, I know, for instance, like an early musical that I've seen is like the Broadway Melodies, right?
Hmm.
I think that won like Best Picture in the early 30s, and that is entirely like just here's a musical sequence, here's another musical sequence. It's almost like you're watching a like a vaudeville thing, where it's like, oh, we're just going to show you all these performances, and I mean, there's a little more to it than that, but I don't know. Like, it is interesting that like this was a format that had to be adapted to film, and film had to figure out, well, what is the best way to have a film musical, and it seems like in the early years they were unclear of how to do that. It kind of reminds me of like how they use sound in general. Like you get a lot, like if you watch a lot of those like early 30s like talkies, there's a lot of like really awkward like silences and stuff like that where it's like they hadn't yet developed like the Foley techniques or the vocabulary, like the audio vocabulary that now like kind of fill out the empty spaces between dialogue and movies that we're used to. And I kind of feel that way about this movie and other early musicals in that they were still trying to figure out what's the best way to incorporate songs into a film if we're not, because it's different than a stage. I don't know. Although the funny thing is, like the in terms of sound quality and stuff, this movie doesn't feel as old as it is. Like I don't know, like the Ernst Lubitsch talking movies from the early 30s, like this, and like isn't Trouble in Paradise just a couple of years after this, something like
Yeah.
that?
And
Like those
also,
all feel really advanced in terms of how he uses sound, but in terms of the use of music, this that feels very embryonic for the genre.
well, that's what was interesting reading about, like how this was kind of this and a number of his other movies around this period were um, not groundbreaking, but semi groundbreaking in its use of sound because like we kind of take for granted, little sounds like happening off screen, whether like like they mentioned the trumpet call or people like calling from other rooms, and like that was something that with the advent of the technology was kind of new, and so for him that was really exciting to it seemed like from reading about how he approached it, it was like another way to make a joke. And so like that's why he started incorporating a lot of that stuff in there because he was like, oh cool, like it's another way I can make a joke about something that and kind of can utilize what's on screen.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I feel like this movie is fairly dense, like in terms of how it uses sound and what's on screen. I was expecting more song and dance,
Yeah.
but otherwise, like you know, this feels like an Ernst Lubitsch movie. Like,
Mhm.
I watched, even though I wasn't on the episode last week, I watched "I Don't Want to Be a Man." And there's like elements of that I can tell are like Ernst Lubitsch but it's obviously so different because it's a silent film, from 1918. But like I'm watching this and this feels like definitively like by the same person who did like Bluebird's Eighth Wife or um Trouble in Paradise or like To Be or Not to Be. Like it feels fully formed like what he's arrived at in terms of his like kind of proclivities and styles. In fact, like I was just on the Wikipedia page for this movie, and I know that last week Andrew talked about how people discussed the Lubitsch touch, and he
Mhm.
didn't know what that meant. And apparently, Billy Wilder coined that term in relation to this movie specifically. Um,
Mhm.
and I don't know if you were going to get to that, Zach, or if
It
this is
was,
just
but we can get to
common.
it now.
Oh yeah, yeah. I don't know
Yeah.
if this is common knowledge or not, but he was talking about the Smiling Lieutenant and how uh, the Lubitsch touch was how it uses what he calls super jokes, and that like a joke will pile on top of another joke, and so it becomes even a little bit more like outrageous.
Mhm.
And the example he gives is the ending of this movie, where it seems to be building the one thing, and then it all of a sudden just like slams us with this really bizarre ending, which we can talk about maybe later. But
Yeah, yeah, it goes into a whole different direction. But yeah, no, and that is kind of interesting. I like also that it seems like something that was brought up or caught on, later, 10, 15, 20 years later, just from like watching movies and especially like it coming from like these movies. Cause, I don't think, even though Criterion has this box set and other, and people have like seen this and there's a little bit of scholarship behind it, it's also it's, relatively new around the grand scheme of things, just
yeah, I didn't
because
realize that it had just been rediscovered in the '90s. Like that's wild to me.
yeah, it was one of those where it just kind of got lost. And I was reading something about how they had like two or three copies that were silent for like international distribution. It was I don't know, it was kind of it kind of had like this whole, but there wasn't like a deep well of information about like the process of bringing these back and things like that. I think it was one of those where they were like, oh, here it is.
Can you imagine being like, the person who has to dub audio for the movie and trying to decide what to do with Maurice Chevalier. Like, how do you make a German dub of that, or a Swedish dub of that?
That sounds awful. This dude. So let's talk about Maurice Chevalier, who
Let us,
this
please.
dude this dude is just dripping in sexuality, I guess, for the people of the early part of the 1930s, because let me tell you, there's a scene in this movie. There's a scene in this movie where, so the whole thing where he's like, the whole winking thing is pretty fucking stupid. So like Claudette Colbert, who, mind you, he steals from Charles Ruggles
Yeah.
early on in the movie, which after seeing bringing up baby recently, I was like, oh hey, what's up again? And I thought we were gonna get more of him, and we did not. But yeah,
No, he just is there and then he's gone.
he's there talking about how he's in love with this woman who I guess kind of looks like his wife, but 15 years younger. And Maurice Chevalier is like, I don't know about her. Just kidding. I'm going to steal her. And just like flat out just takes her away from him. And like there's this great like, simp scene where he's like following behind them with like carrying her like carrying her violin and everything. And they're like walking off to like go bang or something. Anyway, so
This is a pre-code movie, by the way, and it
oh,
makes pretty good advantage of it.
it takes very good. I mean, like literally, people be banging the entire time. And so the whole wink thing happens where like Claudette Colbert is just like waving at him. He's doing some little ceremony because the fucking princess is coming, and like he just like is going hard at like winking and like going, hey, what's up, girl? Like they're like doing that for like a good minute, and then the thing like flies by, and even though he probably could have stopped, he like was like, well, the wink's happening, and like winked, and she's just like, so then like they have this whole thing where what is it? They say that he frowned at her, or he like made a face at her or something. Like there's like they have all these
Yeah,
like
'cause she
newspapers.
she's so sheltered that she apparently doesn't understand like gestures,
Yeah.
or like
Which
human sexuality. Like there's this one part
yeah.
where she asks what a wink means, and he's like, "Oh, you just wink at someone that you love," and she's like, "But don't you like say other things?" He says, "This is when you love someone and want to do something about
Yeah.
it."
Oh no, her like sheltered life is nice comedy out of this. Um and so, and so then he has to like go and like issue an apology and like talk to him before they're gonna like chop his head off. Um and like the dude comes in there, doesn't say much, has like the most like "oui, oui, off" like French accent, like
He's
a
if you've seen Beauty and the Beast, the candlestick is like a reference to him. Like it's not no joke. Like he was intended to be like Maurice Chevalier is like this in all of his movies. And
yeah.
so if you've seen Beauty and the Beast, just think the candlestick.
Yeah, so the candlestick walks in, um, and like the king, who's the princess's father, is just like, you know, for whatever reason, he challenges. He's like, "Can you name or can you spell how to spell
Yeah.
our country's name?" And so then Maurice Chevalier like gets it, and that becomes like that like ignites all of the sexual feelings in the room, because like the king is smiling. There's this gallery row of these old ladies who are all just like, oh my gosh, he can spell.
The lines
um
are hilarious. It's something like this one woman's like, "Batman sure knows his letters," and the
that
other
man
woman's like,
sure knows his letters.
he does know his way around the alphabet."
Honestly, like incredible line is that man that sure knows his way around the alphabet. That's fucking hilarious. And then he's like, oh yeah, no, I winked at her because she was just so pretty, and that just like kills the princess. She's just like, hell yeah. So then everybody in this room is just like fuming with just fuming to fuck this guy. Like they could have had just a whole scene where everybody's just like, come here, Maurice Chevalier. And it's just, and like that whole thing, like it's just crazy. It's crazy, and it's just like the absurdity of that setup and the like silliness of that. That's kind of what coasted me with this movie. Is it just has like, I quite honestly, like there were parts of it that kind of zoned me out. Honestly, like anything with the Claudette Colbert, I was kind of bored with. But when they were doing really silly royal stuff, like when they get, eventually they have to get married because he gets stuck into this lie, and um they have this whole sequence where this guy, they like bring this man and this woman into the bed chamber where they're gonna like go after the wedding, and they like they like spray perfume and stuff, and resituate the pillows and shit, and then like they have to like recite back to this guy that they feel like the room has been set for the bride and groom, and then he has like this like big old stick thing, and he's like, the bedchamber is now a royal bedchamber, and then like walk out. And then it cuts to them in the hallway, and he like hits the thing again, and he's like, the royal wedding day is now the royal wedding night, and then they like come in, and I'm like, this is so fucking stupid. It was killing me.
Oh, but then like that's when there's like another. This is the Lubitsch touch, I guess. There's like a joke on top of that where they walk in and the princess is already. She's like, "All right, we're gonna have sex now, right?"
Let's
And
do
then,
it.
but he doesn't want to because he doesn't find her attractive because she's too uptight and doesn't know anything. And so then the rest of the movie is her figuring out how am I going to be sexy for this dude so he'll sleep with me, and
He literally spends half the movie sprinting, like sprinting up the staircase. He's just like, oh, and then, like running up the staircase. It's great.
it's so good. And when they finally like she gets trained to be sexy and he like opens the door and she's wearing like um I don't know, I don't remember what she's wearing. It's like something that's a little bit like racy for the 30s and she's just like chain smoking. Like that's the other thing that makes her sexy.
And he walks in, sees that, closes the door, sprints up the stairs because he can't walk up the stairs for whatever reason. Like opens his door and is like, ho ho, and like takes a shot of something. He's like, let's go, and like runs back down. Um,
He's just like a real like the morality of this movie is like non-existent. Like he's just a completely amoral character who's just like
yeah.
going from shenanigans to shenanigans, and that's it.
He literally, so like the whole thing that like instigates her getting sexy because she like eventually meets up with the Claudette Colbert character who like kind of gives her being sexy lessons, but like that's prompted by Claudette Colbert's like orchestra or band or whatever that she plays with comes through to like perform, and Maurice Chevalier, since he's the prince of wherever the hell this place is, has her arrested and brought to him. And that's how they like have this whole scene where they hook up because he's just like, aha, as the prince, when you have your powers you can come and you can arrest you and then we have privacy, and you're just like, oh, okay. Which the other thing I was thinking about, like, it has the, what is this, what is it called again? It's Flossentherm. I have to feel like, though, in 1931, they were like, pretty much, we want this to be Germany, but at this point in history, we do not want to mention Germany because it's literally Austria in this country.
Yeah.
And this is the early part of Hitler's rise to power. So they probably were like, yeah, let's not make it Austria and Germany.
And Lubitsch had just skipped town, right? Like
Yeah.
he was fresh off the leaving Germany train.
Yeah, this is like a year, I think a year into Hitler being elected democratically.
That sounds right.
So
That's
yeah, so I think it was, yeah. I was just thinking about that because like when they get to the town, you're like, yeah, this is clearly Germany. But
yeah, I wonder if like it was already like they were already writing a script and like then like the Nazis like take control of parliament or whatever. Everyone's like hitting the eraser. It's like, oh shit.
well, it like it kind of like works on this whole. It's almost like a Marx Brothers level where it's just like an absurd.
Yeah,
It's
like
absurd
Fredonia or whatever
country name.
the
Yeah, like a absurd country name. They're just like, yeah, it's silly, and that's what makes all the like royal like the stuff that they're the royal pageantry and rules and like all of this tradition so absurd because there's like, what do you like, why would any of this be happening?
Yeah, it is kind of like an interesting time in history to like have a movie like that. And I guess in the United States there wasn't like, the sort of like nostalgia for the era of like monarchs and stuff. But like
We have it
in
now.
like I have to imagine that in the 1930s in Europe at least like, there was this like I don't know, like maybe I'm speaking out of my hat, but like in the fallout from World War One and stuff, you know, where you have this kind of brutal like birth into modernity and the kind of like modern nation state and all that sort of stuff. Like I wonder if there was a sort of like, I mean, there certainly was in Germany, but like, you know, elsewhere, a nostalgia for like this kind of like pre-modern, like, oh, back when the monarch was around and blah blah blah
Mhm.
blah. And this is kind of like a piss take on that.
I mean, maybe. It could be.
Maybe.
It's such a weird moment in history, especially like when you're looking at like the people involved in the movie, from Lubitsch to even like his collaborators are all kind of German defectors. It's just kind of like a weird, like let's just throw them all together, kind of like hodgepodge movie. And it's such a weird production too, because like I was describing, like Lubitsch is like getting divorced, and he like got in a fist fight with the guy who he was a long time who was his best friend, who was fucking his wife. um and then they got divorced, and then you have Claudette Colbert and Miriam Hopkins arguing. You have Maurice Chevalier, like, doing his whole thing, but also like sad because his mom died. This seemed like a whole time. It seemed like a weird old time.
It is, and I mean, it's a weird movie. Like the structure of it is just odd. Like this is not a three act structure, I don't believe.
No, no, because the ending, like we were alluding to, the ending is, yeah, Claudette Colbert pretty much is like, yeah, you can have him because he's your husband, so that would be weird. So here's how to be sexy. Here's how to turn him on, um, and then just leaves, like she's gone. And then Miriam Hopkins turns on the charm for Maurice Chevalier, who then, like, you have this scene that you're assuming like then they have sex, and then again like he's like come in to sing and break the fourth wall with the camera, and he's just like, yeah, this woman is very very good, yaha, like, wee, waha, boom, like jump into the room.
Yeah.
um yeah, it's just a, because you think it's going, oh, Claudette Colbert's come to town, like she's gonna steal him away or do something. No, she's just like, yeah, you can have him, and then
And he
he's just
doesn't
like,
care, like, as long as
he
the
does
only
he
reason he would have preferred to be, because there's a few moments in the movie where he's already, like, entangled with the princess, but he goes and sees, Claudette because he's, like, still into her because he doesn't really like the princess that much. But then by the end of the movie, it's just as clear that, like, the only reason he wasn't interested in the princess, it wasn't that he had feelings for Claudette Fair, it was that the princess just didn't know how to smoke or be cool, you know, like or and
he's just,
sexy.
her vibe was off, and
Her
so
vibe was off.
this movie could be described in, oh, her vibe was just off. Sorry. Which honestly, like, it kind of makes this movie really entertaining because it's such a shallow, amoral thing. It's so
Yeah,
weird.
there's nothing taken seriously in the movie, and and whenever there's a gesture toward like sincerity or something like that, it is eventually just dashed on the rocks of like the character's libido, and you know everything is kind of subject to that.
Which is such a strange, like, thinking about next week, The Shop Around the Corner, which is all about, like, there ain't that whole energy is gone because
Yeah.
nobody's having sex in Shop Around the Corner. It's all about, yearning deep inside and turning it into a, possibly turning it into a mental illness or something. Um, this movie is all about just like, yeah, whoever wants to bang me, I'm in love with.
Yeah, it almost reminds me of, I don't know if you've ever like read any of like like the d- like the original like Don Juan like
Mm,
poems or anything like that, or
mm.
like if you've read like a Candide or like a lot of those like kind of
I've read
like
Candide, yeah.
yeah, a lot of those like kind of picaresque sort of things where like it's just this dude getting into scrapes and he's always like
Yeah,
narrowly like
it's
escaping the
true.
scrapes and he's sleeping with women along the way. Like that's like it's got like a big like that kind of energy.
It's a very chaotic energy going on. I mean, he's like a lieutenant, but like he's for the palace guard. He clearly is not, like, he kind of just is. He's in like, it's the movie opens with like, not like all the palace guardmen having to like run and report to duty because they're all off banging people. Like it literally opens with that, where like the like I forget, one of the officers is just like, hey, like like toots a horn or something. It's like, hey, come back, and you just have these men running from rooms and windows and bushes, and you're just like, okay. And then like Maurice Chevalier is like the king of like of all of them. He's just like, yeah, like that's what happens when you're a lieutenant. That's what happens when you're in the palace guard in Vienna. I'm like, okay.
I guess so. It's quite a movie. I thought it was really entertaining.
It's pretty entertaining.
It like I think we said, there's not like a lot going on in terms of like depth, but like if you're gonna make a movie that is 100% surfaces, this is basically how you do it. I think.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I don't know. I think Lubitsch would get better at like having movies that had this sort of like fleet, irreverent touch, but were also like maybe weightier, like To Be or Not to Be or something like that. But
Hmm.
I don't know how you would make this movie more serious without also ruining like what makes it special.
Yeah, he's able to like To Be or Not to Be has so many moments of like just like chaos energy going on. Um, but he's able, like, I think he gets better at like he gets better at keeping them in check where it's like chaos energy, but also he's not like getting rid of the sentimentality. But you also have like Jack Benny doing silly shit in To Be or Not to Be. So
Yeah, I mean, there's something to be said for a movie that is like as boiled down to its like it's like a different movie got boiled down into just one component of that, which is the just raunchy comedy. And like weird like plot turns. Like this is in some regards like a rom-com, right? You have like the meet cute and all that sort of stuff, but the romance is gone. Like there's barely a gesture toward there actually being a romance. Like the entirety of it is like just based on like the kind of comedic absurdity of the rom-com plot in which two unlikely people are thrust into a situation in which they have to like figure out each other and eventually they fall in love. Like it's that arc of the movie.
I'm trying to find. So this was nominated for.
Sweetness of it has disappeared, and we're left with is like a single component of like what makes a rom-com a rom-com. And I don't know, it's kind of interesting to see a movie like that. I don't know that I've seen a movie that does that before.
So I'm trying to find. This was up for Best Picture.
The Grand Hotel won that year, which I think is a good movie. I don't know if you've seen The Grand Hotel.
I haven't. Where's the? They don't have the Best Picture. Let me look. They're-
Because I immediately had that thought. I was like, man, there were so many bad best pictures in the 1930s, like um but this was actually a good one. Grand Hotel. I've not
Yeah.
seen. Oh, Shanghai Express was also up for Best Picture that year.
Yeah. So you have Smiling Lieutenant, Shanghai Express. This
I
is
do not know any of the
how do
others.
you has this come out the same year as City Lights, and City Lights isn't on here?
Yeah, what the heck?
like like I'm looking at this. I mean, you got a King Vidor movie. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
You
Was
have
City Lights?
you have two Ernst Lubitsch movies. 1 hour with You and The Smiling Lieutenant are up.
Oh wow. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, City Lights wasn't even one of those that like Chaplin like financed overseas, so it's not even like that was. Yeah, I
Yeah,
don't know.
it's weird.
That is weird, but um, yeah. I mean, having not seen any of these, but Shanghai Express, Smiling Lieutenant, and Grand Hotel, like this is among the best movies I've seen from 1931.
Yeah. 1930, the 1932 Academy Awards, which is when this was awarded, was also they gave an honorary Academy Award to Walt Disney for the creation of Mickey Mouse. So real full circle podcast here.
They were a few years behind on that, right? Isn't Steamboat Willie from like the 1920s?
Well, this is when they were, going, "Hey, good job on that."
Oh yeah. Okay.
But any final thoughts on The Smiling Lieutenant? It's a little tough to track down. I mean, I found it online. I found a stream of it online that you can. It's through Daily Motion that I watched. That was pretty
Oh, I
fun.
watched that same one.
But
Yeah.
it's like I said, it's in the Criterion Collection through this Lubitsch musicals box set, but I have not seen it on Criterion or Canopy or anything. Um, but again, like if you just Google "Smiling Lieutenant 1931," there's a Daily Motion link of it. You can just watch it there, and like it's entertaining. It's a silly ass movie.
Yeah, it's good. Um, yeah, it's a fun way to spend an hour. It's only like 80 minutes or something like that. It's not. It goes down easy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's there's not really a lot to like. Honestly, like I think our discussion on this is shorter than our part one, and it's the kind of movie that there's not a lot to say about it, to be honest, except for like the kind of production details and stuff. Like it just is what it is.
Yeah, I was reading that. So this was they filmed it in Astoria, Queens, in New York, um, and that was the whole thing. It wasn't in L.A. But yeah, I don't know, dude.
Wow.
Maurice Chevalier, silly dude. Like I
Yeah.
couldn't just get over just how much of like if you like you do like a very stereotypical French impression. It's pretty much what that guy's like.
Yeah, it
Is
is really funny. The first time I saw a movie with him in it, I'm like, this guy can't be for real. Like, this has got to be some American just doing a goof, but he's actually French.
I
I'm
kind
sure
of
he's still doing a goof, but
I kind of want to like see if I can find an interview of him, like just being normal, and if he's still like it.
I hope he's still like it. I hope he's just like a method actor.
Like I'm just
It's
like
like,
even though it's like way later, like I just envision him like on Charlie Rose, and he's just like, "Oh, well, Mr. Charlie, yeah," you know, like just doing stupid shit.
and Charlie Rose is getting like hot under the collar. He's like, "What you doing after this,
What's going
Maurice?"
on here, Maurice? Yeah, like you could have him on like Johnny Carson, just like bouncing around like Pee Wee Herman or something.
Oh my gosh. Yeah,
Um,
what a performance.
well, that will wrap up this episode of Cinematary. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/cinematary, on Twitter and Instagram at handle at Cinematary, and on Letterboxd at letterboxd.com/cinematary, where we list all the movies that we talked about in this episode. If you would like to support the show, patreon.com/cinematary. Thank you to our patrons: Cam, Chad Newsom, Corey Willingham, Candace Sisson, Ron Hayes, Teresa Marthathi, Titus Arthur, and Tyler Chandler. Thank you so much for supporting the show. Next week, we're going to continue our Lubitsch series with 19. Oh, shoot. I didn't look at is it 1933?
What
1940.
is it?
1940s, The Shop Around the Corner. So we're going to get a lot of nice. I'm going to do a lot of Jimmy Stewart impressions.
That's good.
Oh, yeah. You work in this shop? This shop around the corner? Oh, I have to be careful. It goes into like a Jerry Seinfeld thing. What's the deal
Appropriate.
with shops?
uh,
Yeah, but
wow.
shop around the corner. I honestly, it's kind of you're getting holiday, Christmas, Thanksgiving season. It's a good one for that. So if you would like to watch ahead of time, it's on HBO Max. But it's a good holiday. Quite honestly, I like it's my favorite of the two holiday Jimmy Stewart movies.
Between this and uh, A Wonderful Life,
Yeah.
it's less emotionally fraught for sure. It's got that Lubitsch touch.
Get that Lubitsch touch. Until next week, thank y'all for listening. We'll see you then.
Bye.